video, I'm building a very small islet, and this is based off the Ekrahos, which is a group of islands and rocks situated about 9.6k from Jersey, which is 6 miles, I believe. Now, the Ekrahos are, like I said, mainly rocks and a couple islands which peak above the surface, but a lot of it is actually like a stony bank or sand. So that's what I've gone for here. Now, it is obviously based off it. It is not an exact copy at all. Right now I'm trying to get the basic layout of the island. It's very similar to the Ekrahos, but slightly different. Just with the way scale is, I've upped it. There's more buildings on mine than there is in the real life version. Just it's more interesting that way. There's something like what looks like 10 buildings on the Ekrahos, and on mine I've probably got 15, maybe a couple more, just to add a little more variety basically. So right now I'm constructing the stony bank, or the sand bank, that connects the two islets together, and on each islet there will be a load of rocks that, you know, keeps the sand in this sort of C shape basically. So for this build I use a lot of Lost Gecko's buildings. I think every building I place down is Lost Gecko's, and he makes great small, I believe these are from Belgium, basically based in Belgium, but they could work as French buildings, they can work as the south coast of England. They're very diverse and work very well. So as you can see now, I've placed a small road layout just so I can sort of get where I'm going to put the buildings. The layout wasn't really necessary, it just helps me imagine where I'm going to place some buildings and the direction they're going to be at. So these rocks are very good, but it's very strange how they look great, but they need more flat rocks. We need more rocks that are flat because they're just too bumpy, and in real life there's a lot of areas that are just completely flat rock with some undulations maybe and some cracks in them, but these are just very all over the place. They can be made to look nice, and I'm using the rocks that allow water to flow over them because the original assets did not allow water to flow over the rocks, and the water sort of just went around them and created a big hole. So these are very, very useful for doing anything on the coast. You also may be noticing flickering again. I've done something and I can't remember how to get rid of flickering. So if anyone knows, please let me know. It's in the cinematics, you barely see it, but you do see it a bit. I've done something and I've forgotten how to get rid of flickering. So if you can let me know, that'd be great. So the main build for the buildings is just a load of buildings that I've clipped together and put on a sort of rock pedestal, and then in between the buildings I add a ploppable pavement, and then on top of the ploppable pavement I put cobblestone decals. Now in real life I'm not actually sure what they have in between the buildings. I would imagine it would be probably cobblestone, but I couldn't find any images of like the little lanes, or they're not really roads, between the buildings. So this was my best guess of what there would be in real life. I'm using some network here to sort of create a little retaining wall for one of the properties, just so it's got a little back area for where they can store boats or kayaks, stuff like that. So I'm trying to work out what's the best way to create a sort of rock finger that sticks out into the sea. And what I ended up doing is using a road, which I probably should have used the new terrain networks which change the terrain, but I'm just so used to using roads that I just went for a straight dirt road and ended up using that and covering the road portion that I left free with some seaweed decals. But it's very nice because it allows the rocks to come above out of the surface and gives you a lot more control of how terraforming works, because I'm really bad at terraforming. I just can't do it. And my best way of doing it is to use roads to fake it, basically. As you can see there, I added some seaweed. I had a ton of seaweed because this region has seaweed everywhere. It has one of the biggest tidal ranges in the world, I believe 10 meters. So that's a lot of land that is covered at high tide, but then a lot of it is uncovered at low tide. So you get tons of seaweed, tons of wrack, and that's what I've done with these decals, trying to make and place as much as I can. So I also tried to use the tides mod, but it was just making things a lot harder than they needed to be. Because if you imagine, you've got to detail at high tide, make it look good, and then detail all the way up to low tide and make that look good as well. And it was just a bit difficult. This, I've sort of done it at almost low tide. Could imagine it could go a bit lower, but this is basically almost low tide. So at high tide, basically almost everything is covered except the buildings, and because the buildings are placed on the highest part of the islet. And I would have loved to have got that in the cinematics of like high tide and low tide, but it wasn't really worth the extra hassle of detailing so much. And also, as you saw in the starting cinematics, I used Ronix's sea foam, and that would be impossible then to use the tides mod with the sea foam, because the way it works is it's a prop and you place it, and it doesn't really you can't do it. It's a shame. I do wonder if they could be made to float. He's probably already thought of that, and they probably can't be made to float on the water, so they have to be props because they have an animation to them. But they're great anyway. For what I'm doing here, they're amazing. So what I was doing there was placing a ton of ploppable pavement and sort of getting different layers to the streets, and then I use Armesto stairs to link in between the different layers, so there's pathways all over the island so that you can get to all the buildings with ease. This part here, which I'm doing, is a bit weird with the stairs. I end up changing them because there's this big rock that's sticking up. I could have used the terraforming network to move it down, but I felt like they wouldn't have removed that rock. It would just be there, and they'd have to build around it, which is what I basically did. Another addition that's not there in real life is this pier that I am making. I've already made the more modern concrete part that sticks out and allows a big ferry to dock there. What I'm building now